Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back to the Networking RX. This is Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for referring this to others. I love Psychology Today. Many of you listening to this know that I subscribe to Psychology Today. It's probably one of the only subscriptions I continue to have. I won't get into why I've dumped others. I really enjoy this. It comes out not monthly, every other month. Nevertheless, there's a lot in there that I don't care to read about. There's a lot in psychology, and not the darker side of psychology, but just things I just don't care about. But in a recent issue, it's actually the July-August issue, there's an article in here called The Art of Chit Chat, which I thought was really interesting because I do a lot of programs, I do a lot of episodes on small talk. And when I get out and I work with groups, that always comes up, working with people in small talk and how to make small talk. And to be honest, it's one of the things that trips people up with respect to being at networking events. And I don't mean that they screw it up. It's just they don't go because they're just afraid of how to have small talk. So at any rate, I talk a lot about small talk, but there in this article, it's called the Art of Chit Chat. Coordinating conversations more effectively could help bolster social connection. And essentially what the article is it's a quick summarization of a study that's done. It's actually was undertaken by a doctoral candidate, a PhD candidate at Harvard, Adam Mastroni. I think I'm saying that correctly. I looked it up on Google, or did a Google search, not that Google knows everything. But essentially what they did in the study, and I just didn't read the article, I actually got online and found other information that Mastroni had done. There's other articles on there, and it talks about this, it's how this all came about. But what happened was he was attending a black tie event, and he was wondering how many people there were engaged in conversations, how many really wanted to be in those conversations, how many wanted just those conversations to end. And I think we've all been in conversations where we just want them to end, and we've probably all been in conversations where the other person just hoped it would end. And so that really got him to thinking about it. He's doing his doctoral work in psychology, and that got him to thinking about that topic. And so what he did is he and some colleagues, they surveyed 800 people, 367 women, 439 men, 3/4 of whom were white, but randomly recruited them from a crowdsourcing market website. And he sent out questionnaires about recent conversations they've had with a friend or a family, and how they felt about the conversation's length and how it ended. And then they recruited more than 250 students and non-students that were available through Harvard University, the psychology department. And again, he gives a breakdown of there were slightly more women than men, and anyhow, gets into the gender and the race and all that stuff. And I don't know that any of that really matters, to be honest. People are people. And what they did is the one was just a questionnaire, and they just asked, certain questions about the conversation. Did it go too long? Did it not go too long? And stop and think about the next time you're in a conversation. It's like there's, it kind of starts out, it's just kind of idle chit chat. What do you think of the weather? What do you think of the game last night? And then somewhere along the way, it kind of morphs into business. And I think about this a lot when I'm in conversations and Zoom conversations. If I had the time, I would love to record them and just kind of see at what moment, what kicks it over to, okay, we are done with idle chit chat. Let's not get down to brass tacks. Are you buying from me or am I buying from you? But it kind of gets into something more professional. What is it that you do? Why are we on this call? And sometimes that happens sooner rather than later. And, I need to kind of see, I would like to see who instigates it. I can think of times where I'm like, okay, I've had enough. Why are we here? Tell me about yourself. And I've been on calls where I can sense that the other person is kind of feeling that way about me. At any rate, in looking at that's exactly what they were looking at in this study. The people they had in person, they essentially paired up for a one-on-one conversation, and they were paired up with somebody who they didn't already know, and Mastroni and his team, or it's Mastroni, excuse me, Mastroni and his team recorded each conversation, and they asked the participants to talk about anything they liked for at least a minute. And when the conversation ended, both study participants could leave the room, where they were then separated and quizzed about the conversation. Now, again, they were asked to have a conversation about anything. There was no directive with respect to that, what the topic might be, and that conversation would go on for at least a minute. The one point they don't bring out in the article, but which I found online, is that if the conversation lasted 45 minutes, someone stepped into the room to end it. So it's possible that a conversation could go literally 61 seconds and be done. Hey, this has been fun. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's get our cash for doing this, or whatever they give the participants. Let's get our coupon or drink coupon. But some of these could go on for 45 minutes. At any rate, here are some of the findings that Mastroni and his team came up with. What they found is that conversations rarely ended when people wanted them to, whether it was one participant or both participants who wanted to stop. In fact, the average length of the conversations were off by about 25% compared to how long people would have liked the conversation to have lasted. Generally speaking, people would have wanted the conversation to be shorter. There were certain instances, they said about 10% of the instances, where the people actually ended the conversation even though both people wanted it to continue. So if you stop and think about a matrix here, on the horizontal axis is conversationalist A, and on the vertical axis is conversationalist B, and each of them saying, let's say it's a 3x3 matrix, or 2x2, just to keep it simple. Too long, too short, too long, too short. Seldom was it just right. So it's possible that they both could say, well, it was too long, or one or the other could say, you know what, it was, too long, and the other one say it's too short, and vice versa. Or it's possible they both could say, well, it's too short. In the one instance, they both, in filling out the questionnaire, said, yeah, it was too short, would have liked to have talked more. They could have talked more. The 45 minutes hadn't run up, hadn't elapsed yet. But what they surmise is that one of the parties felt like they were doing the other party a favor by ending the conversation sooner. It's like, yeah, they're probably busy. I don't want to waste their time. Okay, here's a key stat. I had just created a 4x4 matrix thinking that no one would want the conversation. It would never end when somebody wanted to, but it does say is that they actually did two studies. In one of the two studies, less than 2% of the conversations ended with both participants, ended when both participants wanted it to. So in less than 2% of the time, it's like, okay, wow, that was great. It was good for you. It was good for me. We're done. It goes on, some other statistics, about 30% wrapped up at one person's desired endpoint. The remainder ended at time neither participant wanted. In about half of these, both people wished the end had come earlier. Again, 10% of the times, both wished that the conversation had lasted longer. And they still had time, but they just didn't take advantage of it. It's interesting, and as you listen to this and then go on into small talk conversations, and I have a series of calls yet today. I have a series of calls every day, and I'll really be kind of thinking about these calls now, because I want to keep track in my mind, okay, who is pushing this thing forward? I want to track what's the trigger point that takes it over from idle banter to something that's more professional in nature. What's that trigger? Certainly if you're at a tailgate party or neighborhood cookout, it's a whole different thing because professional stuff might not come up. But when I'm having conversations over Zoom with people that I've met on LinkedIn or been introduced to through email by somebody I know, generally there's a cadence to it. It starts out, generally doesn't like kick right into, hey, let's get right down to business. Occasionally it does. And I know when that happens, I don't want to say I'm in trouble, but it's like, this isn't going to be a good conversation. It's just not. They're annoyed from the beginning. It's just not going to be a good conversation. It's not going to be a good opportunity to develop a relationship. And for me, that's, relationships are everything. Whether we're doing business or referring each other or something down the line, it's the relationship. And if it just starts out right out of the gate, I had a boss years ago who, whenever he went to go see him in his office, what do you want? What do you got? It's like, get me whatever and get the hell out of here, kind of a thing. And so when I get into those conversations, I know it's not going to be good. But for the most part, the cadence is, little chit chat, whatever, where you're from, where you're located, how's the weather there right now, and then it kind of rolls over into that more of a business type conversation. And then it rolls out of that business conversation, generally reflecting back on something that was said earlier, maybe the weather, maybe, just kind of going through what everybody's committed to. I'm going to connect you to this person, this person, this person. This is what I'm committing to. What are you committing to? When are we getting together again? It follows that sort of a cadence. And I want to sort of be more of a student of that, just to better understand how these things are happening. I would love to record my conversations. I know that would be really odd to do. I'm always nervous when I get on a call. I've been on Zoom calls where it's being recorded right from the start, and I'll ask people, why are we just recording this? And the other day, the person said, "Oh, it just goes on automatically. I can turn it off." And not that it bothers me. There's nothing I'm worried about saying. But the other person said, "Well, I listen to every one of my conversations and critique myself." That's okay. That's a lot of work. But maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe there's some other reason to it. I don't know. I'm not going to judge. But I would love to. I won't, but it would be neat to record the calls and be able to kind of analyze, okay, here's the point where it just went too long. We could have ended it here. But the one thing that Mastroni, what he says in here, what the article says, this is in the Psychology Today article. The other article I found was on a website called New Scientist, and the article had come out March 1 of 2021. But what Mastroni had said is, maybe if we get out of conversations we don't want to have, we could spend more time in the ones we do want. And I think that's kind of interesting. It's basically what he's advocating is maybe what we should try and do is try and look at our conversations and be a little more intentional about when we're ending them a little sooner, sticking to a timeline, sticking to 30 minutes, even though you might have 4 hours after that. Just saying, you know what, let's just end this now. Let's save some for later. We can always talk later. That's what the article, Psychology Today article, finishes up with. You can always talk again later and not feel like, okay, sometimes I feel like I'm in conversations and it's like we're going to talk and we're going to talk and we're going to talk and we're going to talk until somebody breaks and buys from the other or does something from the other. And maybe what we need to do is just say, okay, you know what? If it's truly going to be a relationship, we'll talk again. If it's not, talking more is not going to make it happen. Talking more is only just going to take time away from what we really need to be doing, moving on to something else. So that's something I need to be a little more intentional about. Maybe we all need to be a little more intentional about. If it's going to be a relationship, we're going to talk again. If it's not, then it's best that this ends after 20 minutes and move on to the next whatever it is. And I have calls like that where I just know it's not going anywhere. It's not, at least not at this point. It's just not going anywhere. They're kind of cold. They're not really that interested. Or I might not be that interested. I really don't see a connection. Glad to know them, glad to have them on my radar, but as far as kind of an ongoing, hey, let's touch base every couple weeks, every couple months, couple times a year. If I can't see that, then I just kind of, just note it in my mind, or they generally end up on my, my contact list, just because, and I'll make a note in there because you never know. You never know when somebody says, I'm looking for somebody who used to be a Catholic priest or whatever it might be. I use that example because that has come up. At any rate, think about this. I want to just close by reminding people that we're looking for people to add to our stable of franchisees. This is a unique franchise opportunity, and is in that it's geared for somebody to add on to what they're already doing. All of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, they're working the AmSpirit Business Connections program. The rest of the time, they are doing another business. They're designing websites. They're selling merchant services, real estate, telecommunications consulting, coaching. The list goes on. We have a lot of franchisees. If it's something you're interested in, or somebody who might be interested, please email me. I'm happy to have a conversation about it. I'm not pitchy about it. I'll just share the nuts and bolts, let people look into it, and we'll go from there. My email will be at the end of the program, which is in the show notes right now.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.